I never thought a $30 ice scraper would end up costing someone their freedom. But here we are. It was a Tuesday morning in February when I walked out to my driveway in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and found my windshield covered in a thick layer of ice. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees overnight, and my breath formed clouds in the frigid air as I patted down my coat pockets, searching for my trusty ice scraper. Nothing. I checked my car, looked on the ground around it, even walked back inside to check the mudroom. Gone. The scraper that had been sitting on my dashboard for the past 3 months had vanished. Now, this was not just any ice scraper. My brother Eric had custom-made it for me 2 years ago as a birthday gift. He owned a metal fabrication shop in Green Bay, and he had etched my full name into the metal blade in elegant script, Ethan Michael Zimmerman. Below that, he had added a small decorative flourish and the year he made it. That scraper was a work of art. With a solid oak handle he had shaped himself and a perfectly angled blade that cut through ice like butter. I used it every winter and it never failed me. I stood there in my driveway, frustrated and confused. I had definitely left it on the dashboard. I always did. My neighbor's teenage son was scraping his parents' windshield across the street, so I jogged over and borrowed his scraper, a flimsy plastic thing that barely made a dent in the ice. After 20 minutes of struggling, I finally cleared enough to see through my windshield and headed to work. That evening, I mentioned the missing scraper to my wife Jennifer over dinner. She suggested maybe it had fallen under the seat or rolled somewhere in the car. We went out together with flashlights and searched every inch of my Honda CR-V. Nothing. It had simply disappeared. The next morning, I was running late for work and rushed out of the house without much thought about the scraper. But as I backed out of my driveway, I happened to glance toward the corner of our street where Patricia Sanderson lived. Patricia was the president of our homeowners association, a position she took far too seriously. She was a 52-year-old woman with short blonde hair that she kept in a severe bob, and she wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck like some kind of authority badge. In the 3 years I had lived in Meadowbrook Estates, Patricia had sent me no fewer than 14 violation notices for things like leaving my trash cans out 3 hours past pickup time, having a small oil stain on my driveway, and planting flowers that were apparently not on the approved HOA landscaping list. What caught my eye that morning was Patricia standing by her silver Lexus SUV, scraping ice off her windshield, and in her hand was an ice scraper with an oak handle. My heart started pounding. I slowed my car and squinted through my windshield. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the distinctive dark wood grain of that handle. It looked exactly like mine. I pulled over and got out of my car, walking quickly toward Patricia's driveway. She looked up as I approached, her expression immediately shifting to one of suspicion. "Can I help you, Ethan?" she asked, her tone clipped. "That ice scraper," I said, pointing at it. "Where did you get it?" She glanced down at the scraper in her hand, then back at me. I have had this for years. Why, can I see it for a second?" "No, you may not. This is my property, and I do not appreciate you coming onto my driveway making accusations." "I am not making accusations. I just want to look at it. My scraper went missing yesterday, and that one looks exactly like mine." Patricia clutched the scraper closer to her chest. "Well, it is not yours. Now please leave my property before I file a harassment complaint with the HOA board." The irony of her threatening to file a complaint with herself was not lost on me, but I was too focused on that scraper to care. "Patricia, my scraper had my name engraved on the blade. If you just let me see it, we can clear this up in 2 seconds." Her face flushed red. I said, "Leave, now." I held up my hands and backed away. "Fine, but I know that is my scraper. I got back in my car, my hands shaking with anger. Why would she take my scraper? It made no sense. Sure, it was a nice tool, but Patricia drove a $60,000 Lexus and lived in a house twice the size of mine. She was not hurting for money. And more importantly, she had to know I would notice it was missing. Did she think I was stupid? At work that day, I could barely concentrate. I kept thinking about that oak handle and the way Patricia had clutched it so protectively. By lunch, I had decided what to do. I called the non-emergency police line for Brookfield and explained the situation. The dispatcher was polite, but told me that without proof of ownership or witnesses to the theft, there was not much they could do. She suggested I try to resolve it through the HOA or small claims court. Small claims court for a $30 ice scraper seemed ridiculous, even if it had sentimental value. But the principle of the matter ate at me. Patricia had stolen from me, lied about it, and was now using my own property right in front of my face. That evening, I did something I was not particularly proud of. I waited until it got dark, around 8 o'clock, and I walked down to Patricia's house. Her Lexus was parked in the driveway, and through the garage window, I could see her husband Mark's truck inside. I crept up to the SUV and peered through the windows, looking for the scraper. The inside was spotless, as I expected from Patricia. No scraper on the dashboard or in the cup holders. I tried the door handles, but of course, the car was locked. I was about to give up when I heard a door open. Light spilled out from Patricia's front entrance, and I heard her voice calling out, "Is someone there?" I ducked behind the SUV, my heart hammering. This was stupid. I was a 34-year-old man hiding behind a car like a teenager who had just egged a house. I heard footsteps on the driveway, and then Patricia's voice again, closer now. "I know someone is out here. I have already called the police." I did not believe she had actually called them that fast, but I was not about to wait around to find out. I stood up and walked out from behind the SUV with my hands visible. "It is just me, Patricia." She gasped and took a step back. "Ethan, what on earth are you doing lurking around my car?" "I was looking for my scraper." "Your scraper, that is it. I am calling the police right now." "You are trespassing and attempting to break into my vehicle." "I did not try to break into anything. I just looked through the windows." "That is still trespassing. You need to leave immediately." I walked back toward the street, but not before saying, "I know you took my scraper, Patricia. And I am going to prove it." The next morning, I woke up to find a certified letter taped to my front door. It was from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, signed by Patricia Sanderson in her capacity as president. The letter informed me that I was being fined $500 for harassment of a board member and trespassing on association member property. It went on to say that if I continued this behavior, the HOA would pursue legal action and potentially force the sale of my home to recover unpaid fines. Jennifer read the letter over my shoulder as I stood in the doorway. "She cannot be serious." "She is dead serious. This is Patricia we are talking about. Can she even do this? Fine you for something that happened between you and her personally? I have no idea. I need to read through the HOA bylaws." I spent my lunch break that day digging through the dense 70-page document that governed our neighborhood. It turned out Patricia could levy fines for violations of community standards, but there was supposed to be a review process involving the other 2 board members. The way she had unilaterally decided to fine me seemed questionable at best. I decided to reach out to the other board members. First was Gregory Harrison, a retired accountant who lived 2 streets over. I called him that evening and explained the situation, including the missing scraper, my confrontation with Patricia, and the $500 fine. Gregory listened patiently and then sighed. Look, Ethan, I am going to be honest with you. Patricia runs this HOA. She does not really consult me or Linda about much of anything. She sends us emails telling us what she has decided, and that is about it. But that is not how it is supposed to work according to the bylaws. No, it is not, but nobody wants to fight with Patricia. She makes life hell for anyone who crosses her. I am retired and I just want to enjoy my home in peace. I am sorry, but I am not getting involved in this. I thanked him for his honesty and hung up. Then I called Linda Morrison, a middle-aged divorcee who worked as a real estate agent. She was even less helpful than Gregory. Ethan, I do not know anything about a scraper or a fine. Patricia handles all the day-to-day HOA stuff. If you have a problem with a decision she made, you can appeal it at the next quarterly meeting. The next meeting is not for 6 weeks. And this fine is due in 30 days. Then I guess you better pay it or work it out with Patricia. I hung up feeling defeated. The HOA was supposed to be a democratic organization, but Patricia had turned it into her personal fiefdom. No one wanted to challenge her because it was easier to just go along with whatever she wanted. Over the next few days, I became a bit obsessed with getting my scraper back. Every morning, I would drive slowly past Patricia's house to see if her car was in the driveway. On Saturday, I got lucky. Her Lexus was gone, but I saw her husband Mark outside washing his truck. Mark was a quiet guy who worked as an engineer for a local manufacturing company. I had always gotten along fine with him, though we never really socialized beyond polite waves. I walked down to their house and greeted him. "Hey Mark, how is it going?" He looked up from the soapy sponge in his hand and gave me a cautious smile. "Hey Ethan, doing all right, you?" "Pretty good. Listen, I have kind of an awkward question. Did Patricia happen to mention anything about finding an ice scraper?" His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something I could not quite read. "An ice scraper? No, why? Mine went missing from my car earlier this week. I thought I saw Patricia using one that looked like it the other day." Mark set down the sponge and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Ethan, I am going to give you some friendly advice. Whatever is going on between you and Patricia, just let it go. She is really worked up about you coming onto our property the other night." I just wanted to look at the scraper, Mark. Mine is custom made with my name engraved on it. If she would just let me look at the blade, I could prove whether it is mine or not. He shook his head. "I do not want to get in the middle of this, but I will tell you that Patricia has a scraper she uses. Whether it is yours or not, I could not say. I do not really pay attention to that stuff." "Where does she keep it?" "I really cannot help you, man. Sorry." I could see I was not going to get anywhere with him, so I thanked him and walked back home. But as I reached the end of their driveway, I heard Mark call out to me, "Ethan." I turned around. He looked uncomfortable, glancing back at the house as if to make sure Patricia was not watching. "She keeps it in her car, in the center console." I nodded, and he went back to washing his truck without another word. That information was not particularly helpful since I had no way to access the inside of Patricia's locked car. But it did confirm that she had a scraper in there, and Mark's nervous demeanor told me he suspected it might actually be mine. On Monday, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that my grass had been measured and found to be 1.5 inches taller than the maximum height allowed by the community standards. I was being fined $100. I looked out at my lawn, which I had mowed just 4 days earlier. It looked identical to every other lawn on the street. Patricia was retaliating against me, piling on fines to punish me for confronting her about the scraper. Jennifer was livid when I showed her the letter. "This is harassment. She is abusing her position." "I know, but what can I do? The other board members will not stand up to her." "Then we need to get evidence that she stole your scraper. Once we can prove she is a thief, no one will take her seriously anymore. Jennifer was right. The scraper was the key to everything. If I could prove Patricia had stolen it, it would undermine her authority and potentially get her removed from the HOA board. That night, Jennifer and I formulated a plan. We decided to create a situation where Patricia would be forced to use the scraper in a public place where we could get a clear look at the blade. The weather forecast called for freezing rain on Wednesday night, which meant Thursday morning would be perfect ice scraper weather. On Wednesday evening, I stayed up late watching the freezing rain coat everything in a thick layer of ice. By 4 in the morning, the precipitation had stopped, and the world outside looked like it had been dipped in glass. I set my alarm for 6:30, knowing Patricia always left for her shift as a manager at a local bank by 7:15. At 6:45, I stationed myself in my car at the end of our street where I had a clear view of Patricia's driveway. Jennifer sat in the passenger seat with her phone ready to record. At 7 o'clock, right on schedule, Patricia emerged from her house in a navy blue coat and walked to her Lexus. She opened the driver's side door, reached into the center console, and pulled out the ice scraper. Even from a distance, I could see the oak handle. My pulse quickened. Patricia started scraping the ice from her windshield with efficient strokes. After about 2 minutes, she moved to the passenger side, which faced our direction. The morning sun was just starting to rise, casting golden light across the frozen landscape. "Can you see the blade?" I whispered to Jennifer. "Not yet. Wait, she is turning it. Get ready." Jennifer held up her phone and zoomed in as much as she could. Patricia scraped a particularly stubborn patch of ice, and for just a moment, she angled the blade so that it caught the light. Jennifer started recording. "I think I got it," she said, "but I cannot tell if the engraving is visible." We watched as Patricia finished clearing her windshield, got in her car, and backed out of her driveway. As she drove past us, she glanced in our direction and did a double take. She slowed down, and I could see her face contort with anger. Then she accelerated and drove off toward the main road. Back at home, Jennifer and I reviewed the video on her phone. She zoomed in on the clearest frames, and my heart sank. The blade was visible, but the engraving was not clear enough to read. We could see that there was something etched into the metal, but the resolution was not good enough to make out the letters. "We need to get closer," Jennifer said, "or get our hands on the actual scraper." "How? She is not going to just hand it over, and I am not breaking into her car." "Then we need to force her hand, make her bring it out in the open." I thought about this for a moment. What if we get the police involved? If I file a report and specifically mention the engraving, they could ask to see her scraper. Would they do that for something so minor? Maybe not. But it is worth a try. That afternoon, I went to the Brookfield Police Department and filed a formal theft report. The officer who took my statement was a young guy named Officer Brennan who looked barely old enough to shave. He typed up my information on his computer, and when I mentioned the engraving, his eyebrows went up. "So you are saying your name is etched into the blade itself?" "Yes, my full name, Ethan Michael Zimmerman. My brother made it for me. He owns a metal shop." "And you believe your neighbor Patricia Sanderson is in possession of this item?" "I have seen her using a scraper that looks identical to mine. The oak handle is very distinctive." Officer Brennan finished typing and printed out a report number for me. "Okay, so here is the situation. This would be classified as misdemeanor theft, since the item value is under $1,000. What I can do is pay Miss Sanderson a visit and ask her about the scraper. If she refuses to show it to me, or if your name is indeed engraved on it, we can go from there. But I have to warn you, a lot of times these neighbor disputes are hard to prove." "I understand. I just want my property back. Fair enough. I will drive over there this afternoon and give you a call after I talk to her. I left the police station feeling hopeful for the first time in days. Surely when a police officer showed up asking about the scraper, Patricia would panic and hand it over. Or at least her guilty reaction would be evidence enough that she had taken it. Officer Brennan called me 3 hours later. "Mr. Zimmerman, I spoke with Miss Sanderson. She denies taking your ice scraper and says the one she has been in her possession for several years. She showed it to me, and I did see an engraving on the blade." My heart jumped. What did it say? It said Patricia Sanderson. I was so shocked I almost dropped my phone. "That is impossible. Are you sure?" "I saw it with my own eyes, sir. Her name was engraved right there on the blade." "Officer, that makes no sense. My scraper had my name on it. She must have had it altered somehow." "I do not see how she could have removed your name and engraved her own in the time since you filed the report. The engraving looked old and weathered, like it had been there for a while." I sat down heavily on my couch, my mind racing. "Can you describe the handle?" "Wooden." "Dark wood, maybe oak or walnut. Pretty nice craftsmanship." "That is my scraper." "Officer, she somehow changed the engraving. Maybe she had access to metalworking tools or knew someone who did." Officer Brennan sighed. "Mr. Zimmerman, I understand you are frustrated, but without any evidence that this is your property, there is nothing more I can do. Miss Sanderson actually asked me to tell you that she is considering filing a harassment complaint if you continue to accuse her of theft." After he hung up, I just sat there in stunned silence. Patricia had actually gone to the trouble of removing my name and engraving her own. The level of effort and deception was staggering. She had not just stolen my scraper, she had modified it to frame me as a liar. Jennifer came home from her shift at the hospital and found me sitting in the dark. When I told her what had happened, she was just as shocked as I was. "How is that even possible? Engraving metal takes special equipment. Her father used to own a machine shop before he retired. He lives over in Waukesha. I bet she took it to him. But why go through all that trouble for an ice scraper? It does not make sense." I shook my head. "This is not about the scraper anymore. This is about control. Patricia took something of mine because she could, and now she is proving that she can get away with it. She is showing me that she has all the power in this neighborhood." Over the next 2 weeks, I received 3 more fines from the HOA. One for parking my car in the driveway overnight instead of in the garage. One for having a wreath on my door that was not on the approved decoration list. And one for having window treatments that were allegedly the wrong color when viewed from outside. The fines totaled another $600, bringing my total amount owed to $1,200. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His name was Robert Chen, and he worked out of an office in downtown Milwaukee. After reviewing all my documentation, he leaned back in his chair and gave me a grim assessment. "The problem is that technically, according to your HOA bylaws, she has the authority to levy these fines. Yes, she is supposed to consult with the other board members, but if they are not objecting, it is hard to prove she is acting improperly. The fines themselves are ridiculous and petty, but they are all based on rules that exist in your community standards. So I just have to pay them. You can appeal them at the next HOA meeting, but given that Patricia controls the board, I do not love your chances. The bigger issue is this." He tapped the letter about forcing the sale of my home. "If you refuse to pay the fines and they accumulate, the HOA can place a lien on your property. If the lien is not satisfied, they can eventually force a sale. It takes a while to get to that point, usually years, but it is possible." "What about the scraper?" "She stole my property and then altered it. That has to be illegal." "It absolutely is. That is theft and destruction of evidence. But you need proof. Right now, it is your word against hers, and she has physical evidence supporting her claim that the scraper is hers. So she wins. Robert Chen shook his head. Not necessarily. People who do shady things usually do not just do it once. If Patricia stole from you and then went to elaborate lengths to cover it up, chances are she has done similar things before or will do them again. My advice is to start documenting everything. Every interaction, every fine, every piece of correspondence. Build a pattern of harassment. And keep your eyes open for mistakes she might make. I left his office feeling only slightly better. At least I had a plan, even if it was a long-term one. That weekend, I ran into Gregory Harrison at the grocery store. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wanted to avoid me, but I caught up with him in the produce section. "Gregory, can I talk to you for just a minute?" He glanced around nervously. "Ethan, I told you I do not want to get involved." "I know, and I respect that. I just have one question. Has Patricia ever done anything like this before? Gone after someone with fines and violations?" Gregory picked up a bag of apples and examined them with far more interest than they deserved. "She has had conflicts with people before, yes." "Like what?" He lowered his voice. "There was a couple 2 years ago before you moved in. The Kowalskis. They got into it with Patricia over some tree trimming issue. Patricia ended up fining them so heavily that they sold their house and moved. And then there was Tom Dresden, who questioned some of the HOA finances. Patricia had him removed from his position as treasurer and then made his life miserable until he basically stopped coming to meetings. So she has a pattern of this. Look, I am not saying Patricia is perfect. She can be difficult, but she also keeps this neighborhood running smoothly. Our property values are high, everything looks nice, and we do not have problems with people letting their homes fall apart. You have to take the good with the bad. Gregory, she stole from me." He finally looked at me directly. "Did she? Or did you make a mistake about where you left your scraper? I am not trying to be rude, Ethan, but this has gotten out of hand. Maybe it is time to just let it go." I walked away from him, angry and disappointed. Patricia had successfully convinced people that I was the problem, that I was some obsessive weirdo harassing her over a misplaced ice scraper. The gaslighting was incredibly effective. March arrived, and with it came an early thaw. The temperature rose into the 40s, and the ice and snow began to melt. I would not need an ice scraper for a while, which somehow made the whole thing feel even more absurd. I had been fighting over this scraper for weeks, and now the weather had made it temporarily irrelevant. But I could not let it go. Every time I saw Patricia driving through the neighborhood or checking people's properties for violations, I felt a surge of anger. She had gotten away with theft, with lying, with abusing her authority, and no one was holding her accountable. Then, in mid-March, something interesting happened. I received a Facebook message from someone named Deanne Fletcher. She explained that she had lived in Meadowbrook Estates 4 years ago and had moved after a conflict with Patricia. She had heard through mutual friends about my situation and wanted to talk. We met for coffee at a shop in Brookfield. Deanne was a woman in her early 50s with graying hair and a warm smile. But when she started talking about Patricia, her expression hardened. "I am telling you this because someone needs to stop her," Deanne said. "Patricia stole from me too." I leaned forward. "What did she take?" "Garden tools. I had a really nice set that my late husband had given me. They were Felco pruning shears, an expensive trowel, things like that. I kept them in my garage. One day I noticed they were missing. About a week later I saw Patricia using them in her yard. Did you confront her?" "Of course. She said they were hers and that I was mistaken. I knew I was not mistaken, but I could not prove it. I had not engraved my name on them or anything. After that, Patricia started hitting me with violations and fines, just like she is doing to you. It got so bad that my new husband and I decided to just sell and move. It was not worth the stress. Did you ever file a police report? No. I did not think they would take it seriously, and I just wanted to move on with my life. Deanne reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, but I kept documentation of everything. All the violation notices, all the fines, all the letters. I thought someday it might be useful if anyone ever tried to hold Patricia accountable. She handed me the folder, and I flipped through it. There were dozens of documents, and the pattern was identical to what I was experiencing. Escalating fines for trivial violations, threats of liens, harassment for daring to question Patricia's authority. There is something else, Deanne said. I heard rumors when I lived there that Patricia had sticky fingers when it came to other people's property. Nothing huge, just small things. Someone's decorative planter would disappear and then show up in Patricia's yard a few weeks later. A nice doormat would go missing, that sort of thing, but no one ever called her out on it because she was the HOA president. Why would she do that? She has plenty of money. I do not think it is about money. I think it is about power and control. She takes things because she can, because she knows people will not fight her. It is like a game to her. After my meeting with Deanne, I felt reinvigorated. I was not crazy and I was not alone. Patricia had a history of this behavior, and now I had documentation to prove it. I reached out to my lawyer, Robert Chen, and showed him Deanne's folder. He reviewed it carefully and then nodded. This is good. This establishes a pattern of behavior. If you wanted to pursue a civil case against Patricia for harassment, this would be useful evidence. What about the theft? That is trickier. The garden tools are long gone and Deanne never filed a police report, but it does support your claim that Patricia is not trustworthy. Here is what I suggest. We file a formal complaint with the HOA board, citing her pattern of retaliatory fines and abuse of authority. We request that she be removed as president. With this documentation from Diane and your own records, we have a solid case. The other board members would not back me before. Why would they now? Because now we are not just asking them to take your word for it. We have documented proof from multiple sources, and if they refuse to act, we can threaten to take it public. The last thing an HOA wants is negative publicity that could affect property values. We drafted a formal complaint that was 10 pages long, detailing Patricia's behavior toward both me and Deanne Fletcher. We included copies of all the violation notices, all the communications, and Diane's statement about the stolen garden tools. Robert Chen filed it with the HOA board and sent copies to both Gregory Harrison and Linda Morrison, with a note that we expected a response within 2 weeks. Patricia's response came much faster than that. 2 days after the complaint was filed, I came home from work to find my front door wide open. My heart stopped. I ran inside, calling out for Jennifer, but she was still at the hospital. The house was empty. I walked through each room, my hands shaking. The television was still there. My laptop was on the kitchen table. Nothing seemed to be missing. But as I went upstairs to check the bedrooms, I noticed something odd. The drawers in my dresser were slightly open, like someone had rifled through them quickly. Same with Jennifer's jewelry box. But again, nothing appeared to be gone. I called the police immediately. Officer Brennan arrived within 20 minutes, along with another officer. They walked through the house with me, checking every room. "You are sure nothing is missing?" Officer Brennan asked. "I have not found anything yet, but someone was definitely in here. The front door was unlocked when I got home, and I know we locked it this morning. Any signs of forced entry?" We checked all the doors and windows. Everything was secure. No broken locks, no shattered glass. "You have any idea who might have done this?" the other officer asked. I hesitated. I wanted to say Patricia's name, but I had no proof. "I have been having a dispute with my HOA president. It has gotten pretty heated." Officer Brennan and I exchanged a look. He knew exactly who I was talking about. "We can dust for fingerprints," he said. "But I have to be honest, if nothing was taken, this is probably going to be classified as trespassing rather than burglary. We will investigate, but these cases are hard to solve without witnesses or surveillance footage. I do not have security cameras. You might want to consider getting some." After the police left, I called Jennifer at work and told her what happened. She was terrified and wanted to come home immediately, but I convinced her to finish her shift. I told her I was going to stay at the house and that I would call our insurance company about getting security cameras installed. That night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, I kept thinking about the open drawers. Whoever had been in the house had been looking for something specific. But what? We did not keep large amounts of cash at home. Jennifer's good jewelry was in a safe deposit box at the bank. What could Patricia have been looking for? And then it hit me. Documentation. She had been looking for the complaint I filed against her. She wanted to find Diane Fletcher's folder and any other evidence I had been collecting. I got out of bed and went to my home office. I kept all the HOA documents in a filing cabinet. I pulled open the drawer and checked. The folder was still there, exactly where I had left it. Patricia had not found it, or maybe she had found it and photographed everything, and I would never know. The next morning, I scanned every single document and uploaded it to a cloud storage account. Then, I made 2 physical copies and gave one to Robert Chen and one to my brother Eric for safekeeping. 3 days later, I got a call from Linda Morrison, the HOA board member. She asked if I could meet her for coffee to discuss the complaint. I agreed, curious about what she had to say. We met at the same coffee shop where I had met Deanne. Linda looked uncomfortable, stirring her latte without drinking it. "Ethan, I read your complaint, all of it. And I believe you." I felt a rush of relief. "You do?" "Yes. I have known Patricia for years and she has always been difficult, but I convinced myself that it was just her personality, that she was just thorough and detail-oriented. After reading about what happened to Diane Fletcher and seeing the pattern with you, I cannot deny it anymore. Patricia has been abusing her position. So what happens now? Gregory and I are calling for a special board meeting next week. We are going to vote on whether to remove Patricia as president. I think we have enough cause." "You think Gregory will vote for it?" "I have already talked to him. He is on board. Between your complaint and Diane's documentation, we cannot ignore this anymore." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Finally, someone was taking this seriously. The special board meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday evening at the community clubhouse. Robert Chen advised me to attend but not to speak unless directly asked a question. He said it was important to let the board members handle it themselves, so it did not look like I was trying to control the process. The clubhouse was a small building at the entrance to our neighborhood, mainly used for HOA meetings and the occasional community event. When I arrived, there were about 15 people there, mostly residents who had heard through the grapevine that something significant was happening. Patricia sat at the head of the table, looking calm and composed. Gregory and Linda sat on either side of her. Patricia called the meeting to order and asked Linda to read the agenda. Linda cleared her throat. "We are here tonight to discuss a formal complaint filed against Patricia Sanderson regarding her conduct as HOA president. Gregory and I have reviewed the complaint, and we believe there are sufficient grounds to vote on her removal from the position. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. This is absurd. I have served this community faithfully for 6 years. This is a personal vendetta from a disgruntled homeowner who refuses to follow the rules. Gregory spoke up, his voice surprisingly firm. Patricia, this is not just about Ethan. We have documentation of similar behavior toward another former resident. There is a pattern here that we cannot ignore. What documentation? Some angry letters from someone who moved away years ago. That is hearsay. Linda pulled out a copy of the complaint. It is not hearsay. These are official HOA violation notices that you issued. These are copies of fines that you levied. This is a pattern of using your position to harass people who disagree with you. Several residents in the audience murmured in agreement. Patricia looked around the room, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She was losing control of the narrative. I want to see proof that Ethan Zimmerman's accusations are true, Patricia said. He claims I stole his ice scraper. Where is the proof? This was the moment I had been dreading. I did not have ironclad proof about the scraper. Patricia had made sure of that. But then something unexpected happened. Mark Sanderson stood up from the back of the room, Patricia's husband. Every head turned toward him. I have something to say, Mark announced. Patricia's face went white. Mark, sit down. This is not the time. No, Patricia. I should have said something weeks ago. He walked to the front of the room, and I could see his hands shaking. Ethan is telling the truth about the scraper. Patricia took it from his car. The room erupted in surprised whispers. Patricia stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You do not know what you are talking about. Yes, I do. I saw you take it. It was on a Tuesday morning in early February. I was leaving for work, and I saw you walk over to Ethan's car and reach through the window. I asked you about it later, and you said you were just getting something you had loaned him. But then Ethan came around asking about the scraper, and I knew you had lied. Why are you doing this? Patricia's voice was shrill now, desperate. Because it is the right thing to do. I have watched you bully people for years, and I never said anything because I did not want to deal with the conflict. But this has gone too far. You stole from our neighbor, you lied about it, and then you had your father change the engraving to cover it up. I know you did, because I saw you take the scraper to his workshop. Patricia sat back down heavily, her face in her hands. The room was completely silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Gregory cleared his throat. In light of this testimony, I move that we vote immediately on Patricia's removal as HOA president and as a board member. I second that, Linda said. The vote was unanimous. Patricia was out. She left the meeting without another word, walking past me without making eye contact. Mark stayed behind and approached me after most people had left. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have come forward sooner. Why did you? What changed? He sighed. I found out Patricia broke into your house. She took my key while I was asleep and made a copy. She was looking for documents related to your complaint. When I confronted her about it, she did not even deny it. She just said she was protecting the HOA. That was when I realized how far gone she was. Is she going to give me back my scraper? It is in her car. I will make sure you get it. The next morning, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was my ice scraper, complete with the oak handle and the original engraving of my name on the blade. Patricia had apparently kept the original blade, possibly as some kind of trophy, and had only shown Officer Brennan a different blade with her name on it. The level of premeditation was chilling, but I had my scraper back. And more importantly, Patricia no longer had any power over me or anyone else in the neighborhood. The story could have ended there, but it did not. A week after the board meeting, I received a call from Officer Brennan. He asked if I could come down to the station to give a statement. When I arrived, he explained that they were pursuing criminal charges against Patricia. Based on Mark Sanderson's testimony and the evidence of the break-in at your home, we have enough to charge her with theft, criminal trespass, and tampering with evidence. The district attorney's office thinks we have a solid case. Is this going to go to trial? That depends on whether she takes a plea deal, but I wanted to let you know that we are taking this seriously. Over the next few months, the legal process played out. Patricia was formally charged with 3 misdemeanors. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the DA's office was not interested in letting her off easy. The break-in at my house had crossed a line. In June, the case went to trial. It lasted 3 days. Mark testified about seeing Patricia take the scraper. Officer Brennan testified about being shown a fake blade with Patricia's name on it. I testified about finding my door open and my drawers rifled through. Deanne Fletcher even came back from her new home in Illinois to testify about her own experiences with Patricia's theft and harassment. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all 3 counts. The judge sentenced Patricia to 6 months in jail, suspended after 30 days with 2 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to both me and Deanne Fletcher, and to perform 200 hours of community service. But perhaps the most significant consequence was that Patricia and Mark had to sell their house. Mark filed for divorce shortly after the trial, and neither of them wanted to live in Meadowbrook Estates anymore. The shame and notoriety were too much. The neighborhood held an election for a new HOA board. Gregory Harrison became president, and 2 younger residents joined as board members. One of their first acts was to review and revise the community standards, eliminating many of the petty rules that Patricia had used to harass people. They also implemented a new system of checks and balances to prevent any one person from having too much power. My $1,200 in fines were forgiven, and the HOA even reimbursed me for the legal fees I had incurred fighting Patricia. Robert Chen sent me a bill with a handwritten note at the bottom. Sometimes the system works. Life in Meadowbrook Estates slowly returned to normal. People stopped being afraid of getting violation notices for minor infractions. The neighborhood felt lighter, friendlier. At the 4th of July block party, multiple neighbors came up to me and thanked me for standing up to Patricia. Some even apologized for not supporting me earlier. Jennifer and I installed security cameras at the house, just to be safe. And I keep my ice scraper in the house now, not in the car. It sits on a shelf in my garage, and every time I look at it, I am reminded that small injustices matter. That standing up for what is right is worth the fight, even when it is just about a $30 ice scraper, because it was never really about the scraper. It was about principle. It was about not letting bullies get away with abusing their power. It was about making sure that people like Patricia Sanderson face consequences for their actions. On a cold morning in December, almost a year after this whole saga began, I used my ice scraper for the first time since getting it back. The blade cut through the ice just as smoothly as I remembered. I could see my name etched into the metal, slightly worn but still clearly legible. Ethan Michael Zimmerman. My brother Eric had made this for me as a gift, a symbol of his craftsmanship and our relationship. Patricia had tried to take that away from me, to erase my name and replace it with her own. But in the end, the truth had won out. My name was back where it belonged, and Patricia's name was now associated with something much worse than an HOA presidency. I finished clearing my windshield and climbed into my car. As I backed out of the driveway, I saw Gregory Harrison waving to me from his yard. I waved back, grateful to be living in a neighborhood where people no longer lived in fear of their HOA president. The ice scraper incident had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, about the importance of documentation, and about how power can corrupt even the smallest positions of authority. But most importantly, it taught me that I was not alone. When I finally stood up to Patricia, others found the courage to stand up too. Mark Sanderson, Deanne Fletcher, Gregory, and Linda. We all played a part in holding her accountable. As I drove to work that morning, I thought about Patricia serving her jail time and doing community service. I did not take any pleasure in her downfall, but I did feel satisfied that justice had been served. She had stolen from multiple people, abused her position, broken into my home, and lied repeatedly to cover her tracks. Those actions had consequences, as they should. The neighborhoods and communities we live in are only as good as the people who lead them. When those leaders abuse their power, it is up to the rest of us to speak up and demand better. It is not always easy, and it is not always popular, but it is necessary. I still live in Meadowbrook Estates. Jennifer and I have no plans to move. The neighborhood has improved dramatically since Patricia's removal. The HOA actually serves its intended purpose now, maintaining property values and community standards without becoming a tyrannical force in people's lives. Every winter, when I pull out my ice scraper and see my name engraved on the blade, I remember how close I came to just letting it go. How easy it would have been to buy a new scraper and accept that Patricia had gotten away with stealing from me. But I am glad I did not give up. I am glad I fought for what was mine and exposed Patricia's pattern of behavior, because somewhere in Illinois, Deanne Fletcher has her closure too, because Mark Sanderson found the courage to leave an unhealthy relationship, because the residents of Meadowbrook Estates no longer live under the thumb of a petty tyrant, and because the next time someone in a position of power tries to abuse that authority, people will remember what happened to Patricia Sanderson and think twice. The ice scraper sits in my garage today, a trophy of sorts, not because I defeated Patricia, but because I stood up for what was right. In a world where it is often easier to just go along and not make waves, that ice scraper reminds me that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how small they might seem. And the next time someone tries to take something from me, whether it is a physical object or my dignity or my rights, I will remember this experience. I will remember that bullies only win when good people stay silent. I will remember that the truth has a way of coming out, even when it seems impossible. I will remember that sometimes the smallest act of theft can expose the biggest character flaws. And I will remember that my name, Ethan Michael Zimmerman, is not so easily erased.